We are discussing our 2020 budget and tax levy, and I'll just pass it directly to City Manager Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor. The council will be asked to approve the 2019 revised and 2020 proposed budget and preliminary levy at the September 10th council meeting. Tonight is your chance to ask questions and suggest changes. I will just turn it over to Finance Director Chris Regis, and he can provide the big picture review.
All right, thank you very much. Timetable and key events. We're here tonight, August 27th, for our study session. As City Manager Rodriguez just mentioned, September 10th, we'll adopt the preliminary levy or bring it before the council. Then we'll have our truth and taxation hearing on November 26th, and then we'll certify the final levy on December 10th. Some of the key issues for 2020, property taxes, again, are the city's primary funding source in the general fund. We have 2020 budgeted revenues of $1.4 million of LGA. That's a $250,000 increase over the 2019 amount. Health insurance increases are approximately 10%. We have a debt service levy for the 2019 A bonds, which we used to fund the Lindale Avenue reconstruction project of $388,000. Police and fire personnel cost increases. A lot of young officers, young firefighters working their way through the step increases, which increases personnel costs. 3 new additional staff positions in 2020. Reallocation of staff in the Administrative Services Department. $815,000 rolling stock equipment levy. It's a $15,000 increase from 2019. And then there's several infrastructure needs out in the future. Ice Arena, Wood Lake Nature Center, and 65th Street. Just a quick history of state aid. You can see down there from 2019 to 2020, we're looking at a $117,000 increase from 2019. 2019 only realized a $6,300 increase from 2018. You can see it's kind of fluctuated up and down there. But look, hopefully things will smooth out and we'll start seeing some steady increases, or at least reasonable increases in LGA. What are we doing with the some of the LGA that we don't budget for? Well, we set it up in a separate fund. I call it LGA, or Local Government Aid Set Aside. Our current balance right now is $4.3 million. And some of the uses of the funds that we use this for, we've bought down the Portland Avenue reconstruction bonds by $800,000 back in 2015. We bought down the Lindale Avenue bonds this year by $1 million. We have a budgeted transfer to the general fund if needed for 2020 of $700,000, and that's an ongoing transfer that's usually set up in the general fund from these funds, and typically we do not have to use it. I went back and did some research. Katie asked me to. I think we've done it twice, I think in 2017 and 2018, and prior to that we hadn't, and I didn't last year either. We do some cash flow transfers to the central garage and IT funds when they purchase all of their equipment and things like that. Sometimes their cash balances get low, and I like to keep those cash balances at a reasonable level. For the last 3 years, we've been funding the recreation projects while the liquor stores have been going under the renovation and things like that, trying to protect the cash in the liquor stores. And then also we funded some general fund purchases with a payback feature on them. An example of that is a couple years ago, 3-4 years ago, fire had to replace all of their turnout gear, and it's about a $50,000-$60,000 expenditure. So instead of purchasing that directly right out of the general fund and spiking their budget way up, we'll purchase it out of this fund, and then we'll set up like a 5 or 6 year repayment plan, which will smooth out their budget and things like that. And it's worked really well. We've done it a couple times with fire. We've done it with police. We've done it with a couple others, but it's worked out really well. And they pay back everything they borrow. Just a little revenue comparison, looking at taxes and intergovernmental revenue. Back in 2001, which is kind of a base year for us, taxes were 38% of general fund revenues, while intergovernmental revenues were 39%. And local government aid is the primary revenue in that intergovernmental revenue category. Now in 2020, we're looking at 68% of revenues make up our taxes, while only 10% is intergovernmental revenue. Just an LGA comparison, in 2019, within the general fund, LGA is 4.96%. Now in 2020, it is 5.7%. And you can see with the graph there, we're starting to trend up a little bit with some of the pressures to maintain the levy or mitigate the levy increase in the general fund. Our proposed levy for 2020 is $22,687,000 and $471, increase of 4.9% over the 2019 levy. Our general fund levy is $17.4 million. We also have an equipment levy for $815,000 and an economic development authority levy for $553,000. And our base levy then is $18.8 million. Now, in addition to that base levy, we have a debt service levy of $3.4 million and a tax abatement levy of $353,000. That gives us our $22.6 million levy. Now, fiscal disparities, it's a revenue sharing program. I think it started back in 1970, 71. I think it actually, the first year was probably 1975. I think there were some court challenges with it and things like that. But it's a portion of growth in commercial and industrial properties contributed to a tax-based sharing pool. I think it's a 7-county metro area, I think, all contribute. Each jurisdiction contributes 40% of commercial and industrial growth. Distribution is based on an equalized per capita market value. Now, a net contributor is a city that contributes more to the pool than it gets back. Now, Richfield is a net recipient. We get more back than we contribute. Just a history of our gross tax levy, 4.9%, 4.87 last year, then a 6.11, and that's primarily due to debt service increases and also the EDA levy. Now, what would our tax levy be if we didn't have the Series 2019 A bonds? It would be approximately 3.11%. And now, prior to 2008, there were no debt service tax levies. So this is something that's really started since 2008. And I think really the first tax levies that we started to have were for, I think, Richfield Parkway and also the maintenance facility and then the City Hall, this building here. That's kind of what started it. Our 2020 general fund budget is $25,438,820. That's almost a 5% increase from the 2019 adopted and a little over 5% from the 2019 revised. General fund revenues, just different categories: taxes, license and permits, intergovernmental, charges for services, fines and forfeitures, miscellaneous and transfers. You can see a big spike in 2019. Our license and permits there goes from $1,066,000 to $1.7 million, and that's in response to all the building that's going on here in the city. Charges for services also increased by about $300,000, but then you see they're both dropping in 2020 as the boom kind of subsides just a little bit and stuff like that. Just a comparison, 2019 to 2020 of general fund revenues, they're really, it's a perfect comparison. All the categories are basically the same levels they were the prior year. We go back 10 years, still very closely comparable. Charges for services have increased by about 4%. Transfers have decreased by about 5%. Just look at the expenditures for the various general fund departments. You can see the increase there, the total general fund amount of $25,438,000. 2019 to 2020 comparison, again, just like the revenues, everything is basically pretty close to the same. No real changes in the composition of the different departments and the balance of their expenditures.
Chris? Excuse me, Mayor?
Yep. Councilmember
Can
Rodriguez.
you go back to that pie? Okay. Like, in this book, you've got the pie chart, and then you've got, you've got, the public works, recreation, community development. But it, being that the colors don't necessarily transfer to those little teeny tiny little boxes, could you list the fire and then put the percentage there so we can actually see the pie?
In the
Yeah.
budget message? Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll try to do that.
Okay. It would make it easier for an old person.
Can do. If we look at our three most visible general fund departments, public safety, public works, and fire, their total budget equal 75% of the total general fund budget, almost $19 million. If we compare that, our general fund tax levy of $17.3 million does not even cover those three departments. If we look at the expenditure profile from 2010 to 2020, 2010 is here on the left, 2020 is on the right. You can see pretty much everything is very comparable. There's public safety and fire, 55 to 58. Public works dropped about 4%. Everything else, I think CDs probably increased a couple percent. Recreation is the same. So it's basically over a 10-year period, there really hasn't been much change in the composition of the balance of expenditures in all the general fund departments. Our general fund history from 2013, average increase is a little over 3%. Full-time regular personnel, we have 199 full-time budgeted positions for 2020. There's 3 new positions in 2019, and then 3 new positions in 2020. Now, if we look at 2020 proposed levy, the estimated impact, now these numbers are different from the PowerPoint you received this weekend. I got some information late yesterday afternoon that was actually good information, so it dropped these down a little bit. So for a $225,000 property, if there's no market change, no market value change from 2019 to 2020, you should only realize about an $8.30 increase. That's my estimate. And then if there's a estimated 5.2 market value percent increase, based on what the Hennepin County Assessor has told me, we'll see a $71 increase for 2020 based on our current tax levy. For a $250,000 property, no market value change, $9.23 increase. With the 5.2% increase, almost $79 increase. For a $275,000 property, no market value increase, $10.15 would be the increase, and then with the 5.2% increase in market value, it would be almost $87. So those have gone down a little bit from what I initially had, so that's a little bit good news. And these do not include anything if the tax increment districts are decertified. That does not take that into account. So if those are decertified prior to December 15th, if that happens, then these numbers should improve again. Our 2020 capital improvement budget is $12.8 million. Some of the major projects, continuation of the 66 reconstruction project, ice arena refrigeration project, mill and overlay project, utility projects in there. There's several of those. And then there's also additional recreational projects included in that amount.
Excuse me, Director, could you say that again? So do you think that they will be decertified in time, or?
I don't know. There's still, John and his staff are still looking at that, and they want to make sure that everything is done properly and make sure it's what is best for the city, basically, I think.
So, Madam Mayor, I believe that 2 TIF districts are going to be decertified early, whether that's this fall or next spring. We're
Right.
still trying to figure that out. What we don't want to do is decertify them and leave money on the table.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
we're working through that
Okay.
right now with Ellers and Associates.
Got it. Thank you.
Let's see. Rolling stock and equipment purchase, total cost of the equipment is more than $1 million. Our general tax levy.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Troutman?
Sorry, just before I move on, just because if we could just dwell for a second on the property value tax increase, because that's where all the community voter bodies are buried. And just because that is such a small increase from a percentage base, 85 cents per month.
Well, that's if there's no market value change.
That's if there's no market value change. So assuming a 5%, then it's $7 per month. Okay. And so then that's the 5.2% increase in market value. Do you have, you don't have to do math on the fly, but a percentage increase, so we could tell folks, when they ask, and I understand this is just an estimate and it's not final, and with all the caveats that this is not the magic number, but to the extent that we can tell them, you can expect a property tax increase, assuming your value goes up 5.2% of.
I guess I really couldn't hazard a guess on that because there's too many variables involved. So I really don't want to.
I'll tell them there's no magic number then. Thanks. All right, the council member can try. Thank you.
Let's see, where are we at? Okay. General tax levy, $815,000, so it doesn't cover the total $1 million purchase. So that means that the cash balances in the funds, primarily central garage and IT, have to cover that difference. So if it's needed at year end, I'll take some of that LGA set aside and transfer in, make the cash balances equal so they don't have a negative cash flow for the year and things like that. I won't do it to make them positive, just to basically balance it out from the previous year's balance. But some of the other purchases, there's a dump truck in there, 2 sidewalk plows, 3 detective hybrid vehicles, 2 interceptor squads, and then also the computer network infrastructure and equipment. So where are we going? Right now, we have significant right-of-way projects, which we've been using debt funding. We've got recreation infrastructure needs. There's pressure on the tax levy from the debt service from a lot of those right-of-way projects right now. We must continue a long-term strategy for economic independence. We're still trying to become independent with LGA, although that has been very difficult the last several years with some of the things that we're doing and stuff, so there is pressure to maintain that. We need to continue our long-term financial planning to look where we're heading and what our financial outlook will be, and then maintain our current level of quality service, which I think everybody is doing very well, and then also contain our operating costs.
Director Regis, excuse me. When you talk about the long-term financial planning, is there anything that you see the council doing in addition for that? What does that look like, I guess? Is there more
I guess
detail
when
to that?
I'm looking at that, I'm looking at the key financial strategies that we do and trying to see, based on the debt service that we have out there that's going out, looking at that. If there's any big projects, I know at Wood Lake, we need, the nature center out there, the building is tired and it needs, either rehab or basically a new building and stuff. And how we're gonna fund that is unknown at this point in time. I think we just need to continue to look at, what we're doing and, it's just good to do. I mean, if we maintain, if we don't increase our services, maintain the level that we're doing, I think we'll be fine in doing that. What we do with LGA going forward, I mean, we could start using all of our LGA, but then that might put, if the LGA starts to get cut again, that's gonna put us in a bind where we were about 10, 12 years ago and stuff. So I don't know if I have a really good answer for you.
Thank you. Councilmember Troutman.
I have a quasi-policy question about LGA and how it's scored. That's not clear to me how we get our portion of LGA. The tail end of the question is there any long-term disadvantage or risk that we suffer by not using it, that, if you don't use it, you lose it, and when we're evaluated
I don't,
years from now, could we?
couple, 2-3 years ago, I think the Commissioner of Revenue, I think Myron France came out and talked to us because he knew what we were doing and things like that. But when the state comes in the middle of the year after you set your levy, instead of say we're taking away $500,000, $600,000 of your LGA, and then say that's what you have to make do and things like that. That creates a real hardship on the city and stuff. So that's basically why we said, or the council decided to, we're going to try to eliminate our dependence on this and stuff. But what we're doing with the balance of the LGA that we're not using is, you can see from that slide, what we've done is we've actually reduced taxes. We've used it to buy down 2 bonds. We use it to, level out some of the departments and some of their major purchases and things like that. We used it to fund recreation projects where if we didn't use it, we'd probably have to issue some kind of debt or something for those recreation projects. So, we're not the only city that does things like this with LGA. I know there's other cities that we're only gonna budget $1 million and the rest goes into a separate fund that they use for something else to do. So I don't think that plays into the formula at all of how much we get. There is a formula that they use, and I know they've recently, I think, reconfigured the formula again, I think after this past legislative session. So, and I don't really know what the formula is. Several years ago, I looked at the formula and it's different, so.
If you don't know what it is, I definitely don't know what it is.
Yeah.
That's why I was curious.
Well, I've never made the choice to go look at it. I just,
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right, I'm done. All right, so let's see, Ledge Exec.
Thank you. So legislative executive, there's 4 divisions. And basically, the budget from 2019 to 2020 is basically flat. Some of that has to do with some personnel changes. Pam's position, which was at 40%, which used to be in my city manager budget, is now all in administrative services. But then I moved, this was within the exec budget, but I moved the executive analyst position, and now that's 100% in the city manager budget. And also, we are adding a 60% admin position. But just so you understand, that is still down from what the city manager used to have. They used to have a full-time admin position. So we're trying to be creative and share staff where we can. But basically, the 2019 and 2020 budgets are virtually flat. And if you look at it over time, the average increase in the exec budget has been, about 2.1%. And just some highlights on what we've been doing. You've been along for the ride, so I'm not going to go into them in any depth. We also provided 8 grants to nonprofit agencies in the other agencies' budget. And then here's some, just some highlights that we've done again this year. And then the legal division, we don't anticipate that there'll be any big increases on this. There's been some rate increases, but again, pretty flat. So exec's a little boring this year.
It's a good thing.
Just the way we like it.
Mayor, I had a quick question about the legal fund. In addition to being happy that we were way under budget with Mary Tejan, I was just curious for the prosecution budget, does that go only for our prosecutor, or does that include other fees and staffing? And I was just curious.
Each month, we get a bill from our prosecutor, and it's basically laid out on everything that he does, including his support staff. For years, he was well below the average of what he was charging us. He recently raised his fees, but he's taken some cuts in some other areas, so we're still right on budget with him. So that was also taken out of that. He doesn't anticipate raising his fees or anything like that, so we'll continue on the same path.
Thank you.
So Mayor and Council, this is actually the first year that I'm presenting the Administrative Services Division budget, department budget, I should say. And previously, Finance was included in this budget, but now it's a separate department. And so Chris will be presenting that. Just a quick overview, several divisions in Admin Serve. Administration is a division, as well as Human Resources, and then the City Clerk Dep Reg, and those are general fund divisions. And then other areas, other divisions that fall within Admin Serve, IT, government buildings, communications and engagement, which that is funded through our cable fund, and then also monitoring our self-insurance fund. I'd like to say about Admin Serve, I mean, we're kind of a lot of behind-the-scenes work, supporting the work of our other employees, but then we have the outward messaging, too, that Neil does so well for us. So presenting a budget that does reflect an increase. It's an increase of 28.84% from adopted to proposed. But most of this increase is driven by personnel movement for this year and into next. So as Katie said, my position had been spread out amongst 3 different budgets, and now it's fully under Admin Serve. So everything should really, we'll see things kind of working out, or it'll look a lot better next year when we're doing the budget, but that's why there's a jump. And also in City Clerk, there was some personnel changes. We added a full-time employee in 2019. This is to respond to all the customer service need in Dep Reg, which is a good thing. And also transitioning from intermittent employees to part-time employees to give us a more secure, stable workforce.
Assistant City Manager Demetrenko, I have a question. So I can't exactly recall when we had this conversation, but was there not talk about the cable franchise fees like possibly being impacted or going away, and how that is the main source of funding for our communications work? Could you talk about that?
Yes, Mayor. So the cable fund is quarterly. We receive quarterly franchise fees that go into the cable fund, and Chris might want to speak to this as well. But I believe right now we have 1.4 million approximately in that fund. I think in a month or so we're going to have the attorney that assists us with this, the cable franchise fee, because there's some FCC rulings that are impacting what we are going to be receiving in the future. We've already seen a bit of a decrease, and we're anticipating that, but we've also had some favorable rulings lately that it is not looking like it's going to be as significant as we had initially anticipated.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to say about that?
He'll
Either
be
of
here
you?
October 22nd.
October 20,
22nd, we'll make a presentation to you all.
Great.
on it.
Thank you.
oh. Did I just turn it off? What did I do? Oh, there it is. Okay, sorry. So again, this just shows the trajectory of the expenditure history. You're seeing the increase from 2018, or 2019 revised to 2020. But again, this really has to do with personnel reallocation and some addition of personnel to respond to customer service needs. The good news, though, is revenue history. The revenue is looking really good for this department, and we got Beth to thank for that. They're doing an awesome job in Dep Reg. And so we are looking at approximately 12.3% increase from for the 2020 budget, and that'll be over $1 million. We had, that accounts for, there's a $1 increase in transaction fees that kicked in as of August 1st. We also are now able to process driver's licenses either for lost or driver's licenses, address changes. And I talked to Beth the other day, and she said that that might be approximately 18,000, I think, by year's end. So that's great, and it's only going to get better because as word spreads, we'll continue with that business. And then the other thing that they do, the dealer work, is also a good revenue. It gives us some good revenue, and she's now trying to talk to Jaguar, see if we can get their business as well. Yeah. So here's the revenue expenditure comparison history. And again, like I said, the nice thing is what Dep Reg is bringing in terms of revenue actually covers the entire cost of the admin serve budget. So just some quick highlights here. Again, under admin, reallocated 100% of my position to this budget, and there was a reclassification of the position. Also, we've been doing some staff training and other initiatives on racial equity. That's going great, and we'll continue our work in that area. I serve on the Logis Insurance Board, which we oversee we make the decision of what provider we're going to utilize, and then what the rate increases will be. We're in a 5-year contract with Health Partners, and thanks to our staff, really honestly, we have a Thrive program, and we try to promote wellness. So there are rate caps associated with Health Partners, and we did so well in terms of our experience that instead of what was going to be a 13.7% increase, we're coming in at 10.2. HR, their budget reflects a small decrease, and that is because part of my position was taken out of that budget. And of course, one big initiative HR is working on is implementing a flexible workplace policy. Highlights for City Clerk Dep Reg, again, added a full-time employee in 2019, transitioning from intermittent to part-time staff so that we have more stable workforce, which it does provide more secure, better paying jobs. And in 2020, it's a big election year, and we are going to be budgeting for 3 seasonal employees to assist us with those elections, and that is going to be really time-consuming.
I had a question. I know the Charter Commission was looking at reevaluating how we do special elections, and that would impact the city financially, and that's related to this, right? And is there an update on that process?
We haven't done anything further since there's been some discussion and whatnot. We'll have to circle back with Mary and,
Just
with
curious,
Beth.
'cause it does
Because we kind of were
impact-
getting some different, I think from the discussions, there was some interest, but also some pushback, and that we're going to need to continue to explore it.
Okay,
Yep.
great, thank you.
And again, revenue expected to increase by 12.3%. Communications and engagement, again, Mayor, you referenced that the fund, the communications fund that pays for all of our communication engagement efforts, our staff, and also the AV equipment. So we budgeted, we're adding one part-time communications specialist position. She's actually starting, well, she has just started, Kate Aitchison, so we're sharing her with housing. But in terms of cost saving, quite honestly, I know Neil would prefer to have a full-time staff member to work with him. He's got so much on his plate. Kate's going to be doing about 14 hours a week right now of work for us, so we'll see how that goes. But anyway, we're glad to have her. And then, of course, he started the podcast, that's Rich, and that's, wow, that's going gangbusters. We've got the Richfield University cohort that's going to be starting in September, and we're anticipating a new city website to launch the end of this year, and that's a big initiative as well.
700 monthly listeners is actually.
Isn't that, yeah, that's what Neil keeps reminding me. He's gonna take it, yeah. Also, the self-insurance fund falls under admin serve, and this fund accounts for all claims related to workers' comp, unemployment benefits, property insurance, flex benefits, and dental. This fund fluctuates, depends on the number and scope of claims paid during each year. But things are looking pretty good after some rough years with some significant legal charges. In 2020, our property insurance experience modifier improved. That's a 3-year look back. And so that affected favorable rate charges for property insurance renewal. And then due to a reduction in claims, workers' comp rates were reduced for 2019 and 2020.
Oh, Councilmember Sabo.
Just to clarify, so when you're saying risk management, it's all about workers' comp and insurance and all that? It's nothing to do with like auditing or any internal risk stuff? It's more just this type of risk?
Yes. We do have a safety committee, so that is made up of staff, and we do, monitor to make sure that we are practicing, safety and raising safety awareness amongst our staff. And so they meet monthly. And then IT, which is a very busy division these days. So in 2020, we are asking to add one full-time staff member to this division to respond to increased IT support needs, security requirements, and technology demands. Expenses are increasing due to technology needs. So in working with Chris, we're going to actually increase internal annual charges by an additional 1% in 2019 and another 1% in 2020 to keep up with those expenses. Just other things to be aware of, though, that the tariffs, the China tariffs, they're impacting our equipment costs. So we're seeing that. And also, just so that you're aware, we're already needing to plan for a new security system here at the Municipal Center. So Jane's been doing her due diligence on that, and we think in terms of cost savings, we're going to be able, instead of having our own separate system, we're going to be able to piggyback with Logis, and that's going to realize some cost savings for us. That'll be important. And then finally, building services, that's Dave Conrad's. He and his team are responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of this building, Fire Station 2, our liquor stores. He assisted Bill, he oversaw the demo of Motel 6, and then helped Bill with the new roof and HVAC at the shops at Lindell Liquor. And another cost savings idea that he had that worked great, he saved us about $100,000 by serving as the general contractor for that project. And so we have a building services fund. The user charge is reviewed annually to meet operating costs. again, 2020 is going to be the 9th year of being in this building, so we are anticipating having to do some replacement of things, and so that's on our radar. And that's it for admin, sir.
The finance budget, which is one of the larger budgets in the general fund, comprises the finance and assessing divisions. Not a lot there. $673,000 total for 2020, about a $18,000 increase from 2019. Expenditures are fairly flat, going from 2015 to 2020, not a lot of change. Finance, we maintain all the financial records of the city, HRA and EDA. We continued with the GFOA and the CAFR awards. Reaffirmation of the city's AA+ bond rating, which is one notch below AAA. Assessing, the major cost there in this division is the assessing contract with Hennepin County. They perform all the property assessments within the city. And then we're also responsible for all the special assessment processing that we do for things like weed abatement, nuisance abatement, false alarms, things like that. And that's pretty much all I have for finance. Like I said, we're one of the larger departments.
Okay, public safety. Public safety expenditures in 2018 to 2019 adopted. There was an increase significantly in police due to the increases in dispatch and some of the other increases that we saw within our 3 bargaining units with step increases in insurance and work comp and pensions and things like that. When we look at 2019 revised, we take a little bit of a dip in police due to some contractual changes in our professional services budget. So some things didn't come in as we expected, therefore we were able to change our revised budget. When we look at support services, and support services is Jennifer Anderson's division where it covers licensing, our property maintenance program, code compliance, and things like that. That has been tracking pretty accurate with just basic increases in staffing, some in equipment, but it takes a big jump in 2020, and I'll get into that a little bit. Overall, in emergency services, it has also taken an increase because the last 2 years, as Chris talked about earlier, when we have capital expenditure items that we have to purchase, we sort of get a loan from the city, and as Wayne said, we do have to pay them off. And so over the last 2 years, we've replaced all the outdoor warning sirens in the city. They were dated back from the 50s and 60s, and they were inoperable. Each siren with installation is roughly $35,000, and we had to replace 6 of them. So we've done that over the last 2 years, and that's why you see a little bit of an increase in emergency services, because those sirens will be paid back through the 2028 budget. So it doesn't spike our budget at almost $135,000. Some of the division expenditure increases. Personal services, we have 3 unions within public safety. So we have the step increases for the officers. We have over 22 officers that are currently in step increases, so that's a lot. We're hoping to see that start to level off in the next couple of years. We now have to participate in funding of the Joint Community Police Partnership with Hennepin County. That was a program, as you know, that we've had since 2007. It's a great program. We basically got our JCPP liaison and all the services for free. Now it's not free anymore, and we have to pay some amount of money, roughly $30,000 for part of the salary, and then additional $5,000 for training and equipment. Increase in professional services due to LOGIS, based upon the fact that our profession has a lot of technology associated with it. Those costs are very expensive, and they go up usually 3 to 4% a year based upon what we need for maintenance and software and upgrades. And we just transitioned to TriTech software for records management, which was a lot of money. So we've paid that over 5 years, and now we're in the first year of that transition. And then increase in our health insurance, workers' compensation, and as public employees, we're part of a pension program through PARA, through the state, and those increases increased as well. When we look at our public safety budget over since 2018, I talked about some of the spikes that we've seen. Our budget over the last probably 10 years has tracked accordingly, roughly 3 to 3.5%. And again, in 2020, it's basically the same as what the 2019 revised is. So some of the focuses in the police division. We're focusing on alternative hiring practices. We received a grant along with 8 other jurisdictions in the state of Minnesota to conduct a hiring process with Pathways of Policing. And that's a $25,000 grant that we can look at to hire somebody, which is what we call a non-traditional student, a student who has gone to school for something else and now wants to make the transition to law enforcement. So we're working with 7 other jurisdictions. We recently had a event here last week where we had an open house and we had over 25 people. So it was a great event. We completed more than 1,700 hours of community-oriented policing. Expanding our community outreach programs is always a priority. The Cookout with a Cop we'll do this fall. We always do the Coffee with the Cops. We held the first annual Back to School event. We think it was a great success. Hopefully we can build on that for next year, and hopefully everybody will get a backpack and no one will walk away without one. Unity in the community, again, another well-attended event in our Citizen Police Academy coming up in the next couple of weeks. 26th annual safety day that we've done with police and fire and recreation, so that's been a really positive, sort of a marquee program for us. And we hired 2 new officers. This is the first time in probably the last 10 years that we've been up to full staffing. And the impact that that makes on the police department is pretty severe. When we're only averaging 40 to 41 officers, and we still are able to keep that high level of service, that says something about the employees that we have working for the city of Richfield. So it's great that we're finally up to staffing, and hopefully we stay that way for a while. Our crime trends, our Part 1 crimes are the more serious crimes, such as homicide, robbery, burglary. We're down roughly 16 to 17% over the last 10 years, which is really good. Those are the trends that we want to see. Our Part 2 crimes, which are sort of the theft, the damage to property, some of the minor crimes, we're down about 4 to 6%. So again, those are the type of trends that we want to see. Our calls for service are continually increasing. Usually we'll take around 33 to 34,000 calls for service, and that's 911 calls, administrative calls, things like that. We're tracking roughly around 40 to 41,000 calls, which is a lot. So we'll see how that trend ends up coming out in the next 4 to 5 years, but that's a lot of calls for service. Our support services division, we hired a community service officer position, so now we're fully staffed as of July. We have the health administrator remains a GARE team member, as does the deputy chief, Mike Flaherty, in the police, so we have 2 people on GARE. Our seasonal code enforcement technician position hired for the summer of 2019, that's the proactive position that goes out and looks for code violations so that we stay proactive on it and keep up on what's going on within the community. We're going to look at all the relevant city ordinances that we've identified for updating in 2019 and 2020. There's a lot that are not updated and are out of code. So we're going to take a look at those and see what changes that we have to suggest to the council. The shared services payments to the city of Bloomington for public health work. Normally we get a grant from the Minnesota Department of Health and other grants to offset the costs of Bloomington Public Health. We met earlier this year with City Manager Rodriguez and the other city managers. We are now part of a shared services budget where we have to pay $138,000, which dramatically increased that support services budget. So what we have to do is we have to pay that in 2021. So we're building that into the budget now. So when we get to 2021, we have to pay what Bloomington has budgeted in their 2019 actual. So we're always paying 2 years back based upon what their actual budget is. We don't want to pay on what our proposed is. We want to know what resources we're using, what services we're giving to the community. So we're paying on those actual services that our citizens take advantage of. We're also going to look at public health nuisance protocols, how we do those things, and look at to see how we can improve. Alcohol and tobacco compliance checks that we also conduct on a yearly basis, twice a year. The Emergency Services Division, Continue growth and engagement of CERT, which is our volunteer program. We have over 110 community members that are part of CERT, which is great because they help us out on the 4th of July, or can help us out in natural man-made disasters that can come out and help us do traffic and other things that we ask them to do. They provide traffic and security control at numerous community events. The police reserve uniform and equipment maintenance and/or replacement comes out of the emergency services budget. It's not a lot of equipment, but you know, for volunteers, we have to basically give them uniforms and things and other equipment. The coordinator compensation for the police reserve and the CERT programs also come out of that budget, which is about $7,400 a year. And then I talked earlier about replacing all the city outdoor warning sirens, which is good because there was a Channel 5 news story about communities that are not doing that, and their sirens are inoperable. And so fortunately, ours were all done when they came knocking for that news article. New technology, Chris talked about it. Our investigation division, there's our new hybrid Ford Fusion. We anticipate that will save about $3,500 a year in gas. We're moving along with fire department to the Vitals software to help identify people in need in the community, and that should, I think, be on the September 24th consent calendar once I get the staff report done. We also have the GETS Government Emergency Telecommunications System. All the cell phones in public safety were certified by the Department of Homeland Security to have GETS. So in an emergency situation, we have cell phone priority service that we can use through the government entities. So I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Yes, Chief Henthorn, I have a couple questions. They're 5, but really quick, just,
Okay.
Not long answers. In terms of the CERT and the police reserves, I had a group of Spanish-speaking community members who came to me maybe a week or two ago and said, we feel like our community's not prepared in case of natural disasters and other things. And it really sounded like they were interested in CERT. And so I'm wondering if there's potential budget or funding, and if we could get a certain amount of Spanish speakers to participate in the police reserves or CERT, if that would be an option.
That is an option.
Great.
Yes, and they can either participate in the reserves or come to our 2 annual trainings and get trained.
And that,
Language is not a barrier because we have staff on hand that can handle it.
awesome. That's great. And then the second one was, in terms of the calls for service, is that is impacting our budget, correct? Increased calls for service?
That does impact our budget because our performance measures, if we have to send out 2 police officers, 2 squad cars, our performance measures are roughly probably about $250 per call.
So I don't know if you have sufficient data to figure out kind of where a lot of those calls need to be diverted to, and if we could do an education campaign and help minimize that, or if that's something we've done.
Well, we've always encouraged people to call 911 regardless of
Yes.
what their situation is, whether it's a quality of life or it's an actual emergency. That's a service model that we would have to change if we're looking at lowering that amount. We have talked with some business communities to look at the administrative number and not dial 911, but still that's sort of been our primary bread and butter.
Okay, so I was just curious if it's just that community members really just don't know and they're calling, they could be calling a different number, but.
Well, they can call the administrative number, but the call's still going to get dispatched.
Okay.
Regardless of how it goes through the dispatch center, if we respond, it goes down for a call for service.
Great.
So if they just call the administrative number, if an officer either pulls what we call an information crime report, an ICR, and or a CAD number, which is a computer-aided dispatch, it goes down as a call for service. Those are FBI reporting statistics that we have to report each year, so we have to document those numbers.
Thank you. And then you I remember the sheriff's staff coming and talking about the focus on mental health. Is that something that you're seeing as a need in our police force in Richfield? And is there a budget or support for that?
Well, it is a need. Our officers come in contact with it quite frequently. I've talked to Commissioner Gattell about this, and there is a program out there that is similar to our JCPP, but it involves a social work model. I know we're on the list, I don't know where we're at on the list. I think we're going to probably share the resource with another jurisdiction, so we would have a social worker or a mental health professional within our department probably 2 to 3 days a week to work the caseloads that we see. I know Bloomington is in the testing model of that program currently, so we may have that come up either next year or in 2021, and that's probably something similar to like JCPP, where we would have to budget for it.
Thank you. And how about for our officers? Is that a need, like mental health support or wellness support and all of that for our officers?
That's something that we are training them on this fall. Not only mental health for our officers, but dealing with people that are out in the community. We're bringing in a doctor to talk about health, fitness, financial wellness, things like that for our police staff. But also we're dealing with social workers within the county to try to deal with the mental health component of the same issue.
Okay.
We have COPE, which we bring out from Hennepin County to deal with issues that we have that maybe are above and beyond, what we can handle. So, and then we also have Bloomington Public Health that we can call out as well.
Thank you. And then 2 last questions. In terms of the work that you're doing to increase and diversify hiring, is there any connection to looking at the retention of officers as well, and if there's work that needs to be done there?
Yeah, we look at retention all the time. Our officers, we haven't had anyone leave the department in a while. Obviously, when we look at retention for our staff, we look at what opportunities can we give our staff, so that we can challenge them in their careers to get them to move through the process and eventually take promotions. Feedback that we've received from the unions and from, the conversations we've had with them have said that these opportunities are key to the success of our officers. It's important that an agency our size, which is about an average size agency, not only in the metro area, but some outstate Minnesota departments, is to have those opportunities to retain those employees. If we start to lose opportunities due to budget crises, we're going to start losing all of our good people.
Right. And then lastly, can you remind me in terms of our use of body cameras? I know we had discussions a while back about that, but could you remind me about what we do?
Everything's in place for the body cameras. We had the study session. We had the open forum for the community. The policy's been written according to what the state legislature has requested. Right now, it's just a budgetary item. Initial proposals that we've received are between $175,000 to $250,000 for each officer to be equipped with a body camera, along with all the backroom equipment such as servers, and other staff that needs to be hired to handle redaction based upon data requests. So we're right around that ballpark, so that's going to be probably a budget issue in the next couple of years.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my questions. There's so many
Oh,
things
no
that
problem.
really
Thank you.
impact the budget and your officers, so I just wanted to get those asked. Councilmember Whalen.
Just a quick follow-up. Because there's also an ongoing cost for the body cameras due to the extensive storage needs for all that? What, do you know yet what that would look like?
We're working with our IT staff who works in-house with us. We will probably store that off-site. Initially, we talked about having our own server, and I don't think that's probably going to be the most cost-effective, so we'll probably store it off-site and work with Logis to try to accompany that. The problem is we don't know the cost at this point.
Okay.
With the 2 body cameras that we have deployed now, we are collecting a lot of data. And now you put that on 45, because as a chief, I have to wear one as well, since I wear a uniform. That's going to be a lot of data, and we just don't know what the cost of that's going to be at this point.
Thank you.
Councilmember Troutman.
Thank you, Mayor. Two quick questions. One, congratulations again, and thank you for the Part 1 crime decrease. Just wondered if there was anything you wanted to say in particular. I know there's not one silver bullet, but if you wanted to reflect on what seems to be working, was curious about that. And then I have one more quick question.
Well, I think, looking at the past 10 years and looking at our the crimes that we've had in our Part 1, Part 2, I mean, obviously they can spike at any point. I don't know if there is any silver bullet that I can point to, but most importantly, talking with people on Night to Unite, I think it's the officers being out in the community, going through the side streets, talking with people, being out there for COP, doing the events that we need to do, and building those relationships for people to call. We're not seeing, some of the things that we've seen in the past, such as, a ring of burglaries or cars being smashed in. Not to say that that can't happen, it can happen. But I think just the relationship of us being out in the community and building those relationships and working with the business community, I think has made a difference. People are calling. Before, maybe somebody wouldn't call and they would hit a street and they would hit 10 cars. Now those people are calling when they see some suspicious activity in the neighborhood, and we're getting on top of it and being proactive before it actually becomes a problem.
Good work, Chief.
Thanks.
Then last question, no disrespect to Chief Kiewicz's home, but I know we're using Edina as for to share some admin services, and I noticed that those went up. Is there a point at which it makes sense to bring that back home to Richfield? Are we close to that?
For dispatch,
Yes.
I supervised our dispatch center for 10 years. I was a big part of putting it in this building, planning it. I sort of did what Dave Conrad's did with Motel 6 to save the city a lot of money, acted as like the general contractor, worked with fire. My personal opinion, I would not bring it in-house. It's too costly for the city. I know when we let go of it in 2013, the council decided to contract with Edina. We were close to $1 million to run that operation. And I think things are going well with Edina that we contract right now with.
All right, thanks.
Other questions? All right, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, fire. If you take a look, there's a slight increase in the 2019 revised budget increase, and that's reflected by a grant that the city acted as a fiscal agent for as a training grant, regional training grant, and that expense is offset by an income, a revenue source. The 2020 budget does reflect a 9.2% increase, and that's primarily due to people going through the steps similar to police, the increase in the retirement on the employer side of it, and the addition of we're taking 40% of the admin services position with the upstairs, and then the addition of a battalion chief for fire prevention. We haven't really addressed our fire prevention mission over the last few years because our call volume has gotten so large. These are just the fire call volume, 10-year range, 949 to 1,086. Now, these are everything that's not EMS. It's elevator rescues, it's car crashes, it's false alarms, smells and bells, as we call it. It's all that fun stuff. And it's pretty consistent. This is a map. We put in a new records management software this year, and we actually have the ability to actually visually see our calls. Now, these are NFIRS, which is the Federal Incident Reporting System. These are all the fires in 2018. So these are actual fires, whether it's a vehicle fire, cooking fire, structure fire. And as you can see, it's kind of all over the place. You do see a little more concentrated volume along 77th Street, but you have a higher concentration of people in that area. Fire loss save ratio information, we base this on the assessed value of the structure, and we take it against the loss information that we get recorded. So you'll see the value saved is kind of all over the place, and it was down in 2018. But, hang on. Okay, sorry, we got a fire call coming in. One of the big reasons 2018's down to 12 million is we didn't have any large, highly valuable structures. So in 2016, we had a fire in Gramercy. That building alone is worth $30 million. So that bumps up your value on that. Early notification is key to early extinguishment and robust response via strong automatic aid partnerships. We work very closely with all of our surrounding communities, and we can put a lot of people on the scene very fast. And we leverage all of our departments against each other, because it would take about 20, 25 firefighters to fight a single family structure fire. we can't afford to have 25 people on duty at any given time. We have 6 to 8 typically. So we leverage ourselves against Edina, the airport, Minneapolis, Bloomington, all of our surrounding people. Emergency medical services, EMS calls are our bread and butter, so to speak. They represent 74% of our incident volume, and we have a 10-year increase of 23%. You can see that little dip in 2016, that's when they remodeled 6501 Wood Lakes Village Shores. That's one of our high-volume call locations. And that building was almost empty for that entire year while they were remodeling, so we didn't go there very frequently. These are all the EMS calls for 2018, and you can see the concentrations. 66 in Lindale, we have 4 55-plus buildings in that area, so that's a high-demand area. You go straight down Lindale, that's 7601 Lindale. That's the assisted living and complex there. And then if you see at the corner of 77th and Portland, that's the nursing home right there. So, and once again, you see the concentration along the south end of the city and kind of along the east side there. And that's primarily due to the fact that we have higher concentration of individuals in that location. Total call volume is kind of been a little erratic here after several years of increasing. And some of that is due to the occupancies changing in the community. Like I said, 2016, 6501 Wood Lake was pretty much empty, and I think I don't know how much of a call volume increase Motel 6 was or decrease was for you. Yeah, so that's been a decrease for us also. Yeah, so if you look at it, this looks very similar to the EMS map, but this is all of the incidents for 10 years. And personally, I'm kind of a data geek, so I really like looking at this and seeing where everything is. The two structures represent our 2 stations. So that's, the east side is much busier than the west side, but that's just the nature of the beast. Highlights from 2018, 2019, and into 2020, we've maintained a high level of service. We implemented a new response management system, continued Spanish language training, and we put in service a new Engine 2 on the west side. Our staff spent a lot of time taking a very detailed look at how we use our equipment and trying to make sure we get the right equipment. We've been working with Public Works. We go through the Houston Galveston cooperative to purchase our equipment, and that's worked really well. It allows us to get what we want without having to go through an extensive RFP process. And with that, I'll entertain any questions.
Questions? No? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's see. So community development, we have 21 employees in the department, 17 are full-time, 4 part-time. We did add an additional building inspector late in 2018, so after the 2018 revised budget had been approved, so that was an addition we weren't counting on. In all of those positions, really, a lot of them are funded by folks other than the city, whether it's the HUD funding our Section 8 employees or the HRA funding a lot of our employees as well. We have 3 divisions in community development: administration, planning and zoning, and inspections. The 2020 proposed budget for the city portion of community development is a little over 1.6 million. This is a 3.5% increase from the 2019 budget. The previous increases you'll see there in 2019, we show a 10% increase over the 2018 revised. It was actually like a 7% increase over the 2018 actual. And again, the reason that the 2018 actual toward the end of the year last year and 2019 revised is so much more is because we did add an additional building inspector. And we are paying a lot of overtime right now and some special compensation for our inspectors. And you'll see why in a minute. Our previous increases, we've always tried to do a good job in community development of being budget aware. You'll see a lot of the years our budget increase has been 1 to 2%, 2.5%. So we really pride ourselves on that. Many of the more visible and quite frankly, exciting things that we do happens through the HRA. We did give our HRA budget presentation last week. I believe that's on the web site, so if people want to go and look at that. Almost all of our budget expenses, at least 90%, I imagine it's more like 95%, are through salaries, benefits, and other non-discretionary costs. I went back and looked at my kind of key topic that I gave in past years' budgets. And in 2017, I said business as usual. In 2018, I put busier than ever. And so I'm not sure what it can be busier than ever, but that's what we are with our inspectors in particular. More and more complex land use applications and vastly increased building permits are what we're dealing with right now. Our administrative division, this is more bookkeeping than anything. We charge all of our salaries to this for the entire department. So you'll see like $1.2 million in personnel and benefits costs. But then each HRA project, each planning and zoning inspections, then credits that account. So even though it's a budget of, well over $1.25 million, the end result is there's really only $70,000 in this budget in the end, and that's utilities and insurance. So that's not all that exciting. Planning and zoning, we staff the planning commission, we maintain and amend the comp plan. I will tell you that last week, our comprehensive plan went to the land use committee of the Metropolitan Council. Was very, very warmly received by them. They were very complimentary about the city of Richfield. And it's going on to the Met Council as a whole at their next meeting. We proactively update and amend land use codes. I know Chief Henthorn talked about they'd be coming in with some outdated codes in the near future. We will as well. We've just been going through one code that talks at length about farmland. And so that hasn't been something we've needed to worry about for a while. And processing land use applications for, all the things that come to you, comp plan amendments, rezonings, all those kinds of things. The Planning and Zoning Division is really a little over $300,000, most of which is personnel. You'll see on planning and zoning fees that we only take in $25,000, roughly. And, we try to look at what other communities are charging and stay in line there. That's one area we're going to be taking a harder look at before next budget cycle is if that's a place where we can increase some fees. We are concerned, though, the builders associations are constantly telling us that Minnesota and the Twin Cities in particular is among the highest in the nation for all the fees that are put onto construction. The Builders Association would like to tell you that that's a contributing factor in high housing costs. They have a vested interest in telling us that. So we're trying to work through that and drill down into that a little bit. How we use our money, like I said, it's 83% there in salaries and benefits. Professional services, that's consultants that help us in legal assistance, IT, professional development and memberships. So, and when you see there, some of these things are a very small percentage of the budget. That's gone up a little bit over the past 5 years, but not a dramatic increase. Our inspections division, the state building code has structural, mechanical, plumbing, electrical, all those things you'd expect to see. We are required to do construction, education, and licensing. So if somebody in Richfield is installing a furnace, something like that, we license them through my department. We do point of sale inspections. I wrote here 600 to 800 annually. That might be a holdover number from last year's slide. I'd want to look at that. I have to imagine that this year is a larger number. I would suspect more like 1,000. Rental licensing, we have about 1,100 rental units. We spend more and more time out at these every year as kind of expectations are getting higher for our rental communities. The revenues will cover the new position, overtime pay, and all of these things. So expenditures, personnel is the majority of that. There might be a slide that shows that a little bit more. What I wanted to point out there, though, is in 2019 revised, you'll see that our expenditures were about 1.2 million, but our revenues were about 2.1 million. So we're taking in the inspections division, almost $1 million more in revenues than we have in expenditures. That's something to watch. That has a bit of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's like, well, yay for us, we've got all this money coming in. One of the problems is that, by state statute, our charges for services can't exceed what we expend on providing those services. So things like building permits cannot be a money-making proposition. At best, they have to be a break-even proposition. And so like in 2019, I don't think this has a pointer on it, but in 2019, you'll see that we had to take $22,000 from the general fund. That's because in that year, our inspections revenues were less than what we spent. And if we went back further years, you'd see that there were some years where we were taking $100,000, $200,000 from the general fund. So this one-time blip of earning $900,000 more than we're spending doesn't bother me. If that were to continue, we're going to have to adjust things because we couldn't continue to bring in money like that. For 2020, we've got, and actually I'll show you this a little further. There's a lot of information there, but just showing you how the inspections division spends their money. Again, most of it's on salary and benefits. And, we really look hard at every line item and say, well, where can we save the taxpayer some money? And as we go through each line item, we're so lean and we just can't find any more places to trim that. Our expenditures, on the one hand, you'll see that from 2017, they've gone up fairly dramatically. But what you're going to see on the revenues is that in 2018 and 2019, they're going up very dramatically, going up from about 1.2 million to almost 2 million. So far this year in 2019, and 2018 was a record year for us. We'd never brought in more. And as of 10 days ago, we have matched 2018 already this year. We show it going back down quite a bit in 2020. We do our best guesses as to what projects we think will be constructed and won't. It's probable that we're estimating low on that. That's it from us, from community development, if there are any questions.
Councilmember Whalen?
Thank you, Mayor. Can you, just to clarify, it sounded like you had said at, toward the beginning of your portion that as I know, the inspection needs are going up and that it sounded like you were talking about potentially revisiting the fees charged for that, but then just now you're talking about how there's been so much more revenue than expenses. I guess, am I understanding that correctly, or could you clarify that?
Yeah, no, I feel like our inspection fees are right on, if not a little bit high. What I was talking about was our planning and zoning fees. So when somebody comes in for a rezoning or a conditional use permit, those kinds of things, we want to take a harder look at those.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? I had two questions. So I'm wondering if you could go back maybe 4 slides where you talked about the rental licensing and that we have about 1,100 units. And you had, let's see, that one. Yep. Could you explain the comment you said about the expectations being high for the rental units? And then I was going to pair that with, I thought we had maybe talked about looking at the point of sale inspection for rental units. And so I'm just thinking of like right sizing the needs that we have with our aging infrastructure and rental properties, and if there's something we can do there.
Yeah. I guess I would say the expectations on rental licensing, my expectations have gone up over the years of how frequently we should be inspecting units. Especially the re-inspections. We have annual inspections, and if somebody goes out to an apartment complex and does an annual inspection, they come up with a punch list of things that need to be done. The span of time between that original inspection and a re-inspection, we've tried to decrease that span of time. And so then when they go out for a re-inspection and say, well, the smoke alarms still aren't like they should be, we're going to be coming out again in a shorter period of time. So we're going out on re-inspections more frequently than we did in the past.
Okay.
We have not looked into the budget implications of point of sale for apartments. That's something that came up last week in our work session on affordable housing. So that is something we'll be looking into.
Does Bloomington do that? I know there's.
I don't believe Bloomington does.
There was a
St. Louis
suburban
Park
city that
does.
that. Oh, okay.
St. Louis
Okay.
Park does.
That was all. Thank you.
I
Oh,
had a
Councilmember Trotman.
Just a question. I was just going to throw it in here, just when it comes to enforcement and revenue, and I mentioned it in passing in other work sessions. But when it comes to things like BRBO and Airbnb, wondered if and this might be a work session for another time, but if we wouldn't consider collecting that revenue or seeing that as a potential revenue source for people that are currently lodgers in Richfield, but not, but unlike our hotels, not paying the lodging tax.
Yeah, I don't know if that would be an issue more for the convention or the Travel and Tourism Board rather than for community development, I believe.
Oh, so it would be the board that would collect the tax? I don't know, I think,
I'm not aware, from the community development standpoint, I'm not aware of any particular tax or fee that would be typically collected by a community development department on short-term rentals.
it's not right, it's a lodging tax. Maybe, Chief?
That's probably something our support services would have to look at an ordinance to put on as far as collecting those taxes as part of the license fees. I know currently, right now, we don't have anything like that.
Yeah, so just for our hotels, anybody who stays at a hotel has to pay that tax, but anybody that stays at an Airbnb, so the hotels are hurt by paying an additional, or their lodgers paying additional tax that Airbnb folks, BRBO folks don't have to pay. But I'm not sure who, maybe City Manager Rodriguez, you have some insight?
Yes, Mayor. I know Edina was looking into this just recently, and there's been some chatter among city managers on it, so it's something that was on my list to explore, so I'll move it up on my list.
I would just add that the question of the short-term rentals came up maybe a couple of years ago in the context of planning and zoning approvals. And so we researched it at that point in time. And we'd concluded that the volume of these isn't as great as the interest in the topic is. In any given year, I don't know about Chief Henthorn, but issues related to short-term rentals are very, very, very infrequent. I hear almost nothing about them.
In terms of concerns of neighbor?
Well, and maybe I'm making a supposition that's false. I'm assuming that if there were a lot of them out there, I would be hearing more complaints about them. And so I think we concluded at that point in time, and we'd done some, searching on the VRBO website and on the other websites, and not many were showing up in Richfield at all at that point in time.
All right. Thank you.
We only have three categories that, and the first one is the sales, which I think is very important. It's the fuel of our operations. We're experiencing a pretty good increase in sales, something like we haven't experienced in the last 5 years. The numbers are kind of kind of skewed because last year at this time, we had just opened the Penn Liquor Store. So thus the large increase there. There's, year-to-date, you'll see that Lindale is down 8%, and that is because they experienced a huge increase in sales while Penn was closed last year. So we're comparing last year's numbers, this year's numbers. So by the end of the year, I think it'll all be real numbers again. But, you know, we remodeled the 64th in Lindale, 66th in Cedar, and 64th in Penn in about 6 years. And I think that was money it was a lot of money, but I think it was well spent because we're kind of getting the benefit now. And just recently, the 77th and Lindale store has started to really come around. That's been one we've dragged. It's like pushing a piece of rope for the last 10 years. With the opening of Aldi and Sierra Trading Post last week, we saw a huge spike. We were up almost 30% last week. So I have a real good feeling about that. The Cedar store is very strong right now, and I think with Chamberlain opening up, I mean, I think there's people moving in right now. I think you're going to see that store go crazy. So in my estimates for sales this year, I think it was 11.5 million, I think, or 12.5 million. I think we're going to see closer to 13 million for annual sales. And then when the sales go up, the expenses are diluted, so I think the profit is going to be good, and we can start putting money back into the special revenue fund. We've done a lot of local things that's been a lot of fun, but kind of solidified our customers, as we have a lot of customer loyalty. Like we have our annual beer fest where we get a lot of local vendors in. They serve beer, they answer questions, they give away hats and T-shirts, things like that. But people look forward to that every year, and they come in a couple months ahead of time. When's your beer fest? Same thing with local spirits. We try to feature a local spirit being sampled in our stores on a weekly basis. We did something kind of fun. We sent our we call them our whiskey gurus, a couple of managers that know spirits, and they went to Tattersall in North Minneapolis and selected a blend that's done really well. And customers are always asking, what are you going to do next? I think the next thing we're going to do is brew a beer, and it's going to have a Richfield theme to it. It's going to be done by Finnegan's. So we meet with them next week. We finally completed all of our aging infrastructure with the roof replacement of 7700 Lindale and a new cooling system. That kind of completes all that the major things that we had to do.
Councilmember Troutman.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a question, and something in the budget in general. I know we have an asset sheet, and I saw it referenced. But I was kind of curious what the assets were and whether they were leveraged or not. Are the buildings that we have are they free and clear? Are they, so
Yes.
we don't have any,
There's no debt.
there's no debt on
Just
any,
besides the
bonding and the.
Right.
Got it.
Okay. And more local promotions. And I know Edwina was really adamant about letting our customers know that what you spend in our liquor stores goes back into our community. So we've got reader boards in the store, and they have a dwell where they roll pictures of parks, Richfield parks, and it says, when you spend your money here, it stays in town. So we're going to continue to do that. We've got the Foundation Wine event, it's another event. And then we embarked on the Roundup program a couple of months ago, and that's been really successful. People are really, really sympathetic with Richfield. If it's something for Richfield, they'll spend the money. And Amy's got a whole list of items, and some of them aren't very expensive, but it's things that people take their extra change and at the point of sale give it to us. And some of the people are really generous. Like they say, no, I don't want to round up 17 cents. I want to give you $5. So there's a lot of that. So we've raised almost, I think it's $14,000 in just a short amount of time. And then we're going to participate in Penn Fest. We never did that before because we were always closed on Sunday, but now we're open. And last year we had freezies for the kids. That was really, kids like that. The parents got to taste some beer inside, and it was a lot of fun. So, I mean, things look fairly good for as far as profitability for the stores. And I think the big main thing is we made the stores look good. They kind of got an urban beat to them. They're fun to shop. They're bright. And you've got everything at eye level, so there's no hidden spots. So there's one of the boom boards. So that's when people are standing in line waiting to check out. These roll, and it's got a picture of a different park on it. Any questions?
Questions from council?
No, I just wanted to tell Bill that I went to about 10 thrift stores, and I bought me I think it bought me 4 flasks. So I'll bring them, I'll wash them out and bring them, and, and then
Refill 'em?
the next time you fill them up and you bring a full one, and I'll give you an empty one, and we'll rotate like that. How's that?
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, Public Works. I've been waiting all day for this. Here's our mission statement, and basically this says we're in the business of quality of life, improving quality of life. Here's what Public Works is. We've got 54 employees. There's the breakdowns. We do utilize 14 seasonal staff in the summer months. Unfortunately, they're all leaving right about now, going back to school. We also do use census-served crews year-round. They're here 4 days a week and help us out also. Divisions of Public Works that are in the general fund: admin, engineering, forestry, streets and parks. The utilities are enterprise funds, and then we have an internal service fund for central garage. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. That though it's not a general fund, it does affect other budgets also. Here's kind of the breakdown of what we've got going on. There's one of the joys of working with engineers is they like numbers and parentheses and all kinds of fun stuff. So more or less, we're kind of all over the place. We are losing a position or reducing a position in engineering and adding one in the Parks Department. That's mainly due to some of the new services that we're going to be providing with the new projects. All the medians and boulevard trees on 66th Street on Portland. We've increased and will be increasing our snow plowing efforts, and we've got a new band shell to maintain. This slide shows the 3% average over the years. Public Works has stayed under that for through those years with a couple dips here and there. 2019 again is losing the engineering position. This slide, Chris showed a slide, the pie chart earlier that showed that 17% of Public Works comes out of the general fund. Out of the admin budget, Public Works is a big portion. $330,000 is the total charge, but actually only $190,000 of that comes out of the general fund. We do utilize other funding sources, capital projects, and our utilities for admin. Engineering is the same. It's for our engineering department, we've used capital projects over the years to fund our engineering department. With pushing 65th Street out, it's going to put a little bit of dent into the operations. We are adding $145,000 of MSA maintenance money to recoup for that. And again, utilities and capital projects. About half of this division is actual impact to general fund. Street and forestry, a little bit of the same. We do use some different funding sources. Streetlight user fee is a big one that pays for all the electricity costs for operating the streetlights and traffic signals. And the stormwater utility is just a labor charge, what we charge for street sweeping. here's our core services. So these are all great services we provide. A couple of the bullets I'd like to talk about are special projects. Those are things like the park signs. We just paved trails at Donaldson Park. There's things that we try to budget every year to add to that quality of life that's in here. And we'd like to continue that, and along with the new median maintenance and with the sidewalks and the cycle tracks and the band shell. This slide kind of does show our we call them reactive service requests. They're requests that are called in. So they're potholes, they're street lights out. I'd like my tree trimmed. 2018 is the last year we have full data. Utilities are included in here. Also, it tells a little story of the things we do. So this, like, again, it excludes the snow plowing, the mowing, and the things like that. The water issues, we had a large number of water meters that were not working. So that's why we're in the middle of a meter replacement right now. And we also did have a bunch of frozen water services that year.
Did those frozen water services, were there a lot more this last year than?
I think
Before?
in 2018 there were more. There were some this year, and it's a trend that I'm sure is going to continue. It's one of the things I do believe in is climate change, and it's going to become more and more frequent.
Okay.
Capital projects. All of these projects represent nearly $62 million in infrastructure improvements. One thing I'd like to add with our capital improvement projects, we've always tried to include public art. And the capital projects were the funding source for the public art. One of our goals for 2020 is to work with Rec Services and come up with a policy plan procedure to add public art. We definitely have places where we can add. So that is a 2020 goal. Central Garage, so we're off of general fund. Central Garage, this is a list of vehicles we will be purchasing or already have. Under 2019, we decided not to implement the PHEVs in community development. We use them in engineering and rec services. So we do have a little bit of flexibility here. Something we'll still be looking at.
I think we've got a question from Councilmember Supple.
No, just a comment. Thank you for the arts funding. I know that we've
Yeah,
been
that's
asking
great.
about that, so it's good to hear that that's coming.
Sure, yes. The one thing, this is where Central Garage affects other general fund budgets. We do charge equipment operating charges to each division. It's for fuel, tires, maintenance. And it's one of the things we've been looking at and talking with other divisions a lot is getting more towards plug-in electric or hybrid electrics or hybrids. So we're introducing the Ford Fusions for police. We have a couple of the PHEVs right now. The one in engineering's been on the road the longest so far. And I checked this morning, it's been on the road for 1,000 miles and hasn't gone through a tank of gas yet. So there's going to be some cost savings to departments that we're able to utilize these. So I know there is a hybrid option for police squad cars. We've been talking about that a lot with Chief Henthorn. They're going to be available next year, but I wouldn't recommend purchasing them yet. It's a new model year. We'll see how they work, and then we'll go from there. But it's definitely a possibility, and it's a way to save general fund money. Utility funds. Just take quick on this one. Water usage, water utility. Water usage is down. Producing water is going up. Cost is going up. Our wastewater, our Met Council charges, 60% of that budget is disposal charges, and that's going down a little bit. Regionally, it's going up, but for Richfield, it's going down due to the reduced amount of water used. And stormwater utility, well, actually with all the utilities, we're in the process of doing a condition assessment and seeing what is the best way to maintain that infrastructure. We've done a lot with roads, a lot with what's above ground, and now we're looking at what's underground. That's it.
Questions? Councilmember Garcia.
Well, I wanted to ask you, this is probably doesn't have much to do with the budget, but when are you going to be paving? Are you going to be sealing the pavers at Band Shell?
I've had some discussions about that. I know I haven't had a chance to go look at it. I don't know if we'll need to. I'll look. We've got a bunch of pavers along 66th Street. They're not going to need to be sealed. So,
Well, these are the ones that have the names of
Yeah.
people here. Well, from what I understand, because I'm on that committee, I understand that if you don't seal them, they do tend to crumble later on, so.
if you put salt on them, and I don't plan on putting salt on those.
Okay, well,
But I'll look into it.
good.
Other questions? I had two questions. So I've had a couple questions from residents, and they were actually on the Night to Unite, National Night Out, about adding trash bins and recycling along the cycle tracks and the boulevards with the updates of our roads. How does that work?
Are they talking about the new Big Belly trash cans we have where we can put?
No, there were residents that live along 66 Portland saying we're getting more trash in our yards, litter, things like that, and we notice there's no garbage and recycling along these, and people are using them.
Yeah, there are locations throughout there. There's concrete pads. They're not out yet. I'd like to know the locations so we can get them in the right spot.
Okay.
They added trash cans at the roundabout that aren't in a good spot that I'm looking for a new home.
Okay, great. And then how does that work? I think we had this conversation last year, but with some of the bus stops, when I drive by them, I see litter and things, and I think that they were special districts that they're in, or?
Yeah, we have two special assessment maintenance districts. One of them's the hub. It's basically Nicollet to 35W, that area, and then along 77th Street. We do provide trash pickup services in those areas, and those maintenance districts get charged for that. It's something we're looking at expanding outside of those districts.
Yeah, I think that would be great, because there's one by my house over by Mount Calvary Church. There's a bus stop, and there's always
Yeah,
trash there.
that would be one of them to add, for
Yeah.
sure.
So you're saying that there is opportunity, so if residents do who live along those boulevards to connect them to staff and say, yeah, we could possibly consider putting a bin there?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then the second question I have is, I don't know what it looks like to do this, but how do you account for all the impacts that climate change does have directly on your department? And I know we went into overtime, with our plowing, and how do you even begin to account for that and plan?
So, roll with the punches, is that an answer? No, it's something we're trying to be aware of. The salt reduction program we're part of, we're always trying to look at that. In the winter seasons, what we're noticing is more and more ice events. And you almost can't reduce the amount of salt for ice. So it's something we're looking at. I'm talking with people from other cities to see what they're thinking, but it's absolutely something that's on our minds.
Great, thank you. All right, thank you.
You next.
Last but not least, recreation. Thank you. We are the fun department. That's our department. With recreation services, our funds come out of two areas. One is the general fund, and the second one is special facilities. Before we get into numbers, so I just wanted to highlight a couple kind of special things that we're doing in the department. The first one is we have 3 new playgrounds going in. They'll be installed hopefully this October, Jefferson, Nicollet, and Taft Parks. So Chris Link and I worked with different neighborhoods to get feedback, and I think we have really nice equipment going in that residents will be really happy with. We also have been working really hard to restore prairie at Woodlake Nature Center. So the south end of the park, we have about a 12-acre prairie. And the last 3 years, we have gotten a grant through the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources called the Conservation Partner Legacy Grant. And with that, we've been able to maintain the prairie, get rid of a lot of invasive species, put in seeds for a lot of pollinator plants. We're excited we applied and we got another 3-year round of grant money from them, which is a great cost savings because prairie management is very expensive. And our work is starting to pay off. Last month, we saw our first endangered species. It was confirmed by the University of Minnesota. We saw the rusty patch bee. So we've been monitoring inventory on different pollinator species out there. We also have seen an uptick of monarch butterflies, which are set to be listed also. So it's exciting. We're providing this habitat. And then, of course, the Richfield Community Band Shell. This year was the first year we were able to use the band shell for programming, and we're really excited about some of the things we were able to do with it. On Tuesday mornings throughout the summer, we had programming for children, and Thursday we had music. And then we had a wide host of community events. We were able to utilize it for Red, White, and Blue Days, for family night, for movie night, the back to school event a little over a week ago. We used that space well. Last weekend we had a church service out there. The urban wildland races, we use that for a race packet pickup. So we've been really able to draw residents to that facility so they can experience it. Next year, we've already had so many requests for musicians and entertainers to perform. We're entertaining the idea of having like a Richfield talent show. Like Richfield's Got Talent. I think it'd be so fun. Be interesting to see what comes out and what we see. But yeah, I think some sort of talent show we were talking about. And then we were also looking at getting a movie screen and having routinely scheduled movies in the park throughout the summer because that's popular throughout the metro. Another thing that we've kind of partnered with Public Works on is our sidewalk poetry project, and that's kind of in conjunction with a lot of the improvements on 66th Street. So we do have 13 poems that went in previous year on Portland. So this year we got 20 more installed, so we have a total of 33 poems. And in July, we had all the poets come to the band shell and read their poem. And we had a total of 80 submitted. So the Richfield Arts Commission selected the 20 that went in. And for people that are not able to walk, get out there and check out the poems, we created a really cool web page with a virtual tour. So you can go over a little quill and the poem pops up with the artist. So it's kind of a neat way for everyone to see the poems even from home.
Is that part of your website?
Yep, it's on the city website on the recreation page.
Okay.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Yep, and it's all been updated, so all of them are there. And then looking ahead to public art, we are kind of assuming we're working under the proposal that was set forth in 2018. And in that proposal, Jim Topetoffer presented, it included that businesses and developers and other organizations, we are invited to submit art proposals with a 2-to-1 matching requirement. And the proposals would also have to have a funding plan, and that matching requirement would be up to $10,000. And how we would see this working moving forward is as an art project comes in, the Arts Commission, we get a chance to review it with staff and then make a recommendation to the council. And the following year, we would budget the $10,000 for the art to be installed. Ideas where the money could be budgeted from, it could be kind of a combination of utilizing the Roundup program and capital improvement funds. You know, I do have a little bit of concern with some of the CIP money for this, just because it would take away from some of the recreation priorities we have right now. So it's something we could revisit in the coming year where that would actually be budgeted out of. But I think it's a good plan moving forward to work from.
Director Merkel, I have a couple questions about that.
Yep.
One thing is I just spoke, well, maybe a couple weeks ago, to the developer of the Lake Winds area, the Lindell Gardens, and they were talking about having money for some poems. So I don't know if they've connected at all with Director Stark or you, but I said, oh, our Arts Commission just did that. You should just work with our staff and our commission. So have they communicated?
Mayor, no, it hasn't.
Madam Mayor, not that particular one, no, and we'll follow up on that. I will tell you that in addition to this, kind of a separate piece, anytime something's funded by the HRA, we make it, at the staff level, we suggest to them that would assist them in getting approvals through the HRA. And so they're not seeking the $10,000 grant. Developers aren't when they include public art in their proposals. That has good and bad to it. If they're not seeking our money, they probably don't need as much approvals from us. We have been suggesting that they work through the Arts Commission. I know that at the Chamberlain, they met with the staff liaison to the Arts Commission last week and brought her out to talk about ideas. So there is, in addition to the fund, there are other public arts efforts going on.
Thank you. And then I'm just wondering, this is just an area I don't know a lot about, but are there foundations and other arts, like philanthropic organizations, that wouldn't want to fund, so we could get more robust funding for different types and bigger public art projects in our community?
Madam Mayor, that's a good question. I would assume so in a large metropolitan areas, so that's something we could look into. Because I think we
will
could
do that too.
do more.
Cool. Thank you.
Mhm.
Councilmember Troutman.
I just add, if you're looking for $10,000, a chunk of that could come from the Richfield Foundation. It would be worth applying if you're interested.
Definitely, thank you. Next year, the Richfield Arts Commission is working on a mural project that would go in front of the pool that would add a little bit of color and interest to the pool house. Right now, they are getting proposals from different artists, and they're excited to select one and kind of move forward with that project for next year.
Whereabouts would that go?
It's going to be on that triangle, kind of right over the front doors there. And it's really visible from 66th Street in the parking lot. So I think it will draw interest to the building throughout the year. Yep. Some of the performance measures that we look at to see how we're working within our capacity, if we're maintaining and building, our overall program registrations have been kind of maintained. A little over 29,000 is very similar to last year. Our visits are up at Woodlake Nature Center. Our memorial engravings are down just a little bit, but we still have a lot of room on the pillars for engravings. And the volunteer hours have held steady at 4,200, and then the overall dollar saved from volunteer hours has gone up. It's over $100,000.
Will you eventually add the pavers at the band shell for the funds coming in?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Garcia, yes, we could add that.
Okay,
So you can see that as well. Yep.
that's why we need them sealed. So that they'll attract other people to, because we are working on bringing more money in. So that I think the band shell and the city have a terrific partnership, and I thank you for coming on board and helping out so much.
Oh, thank you.
It's a good community, city endeavor, so.
I agree. These are the events, our main events that we put on throughout the year. There's quite a few smaller ones, but you can see every season has a host of events that we put on. It's been a great opportunity for us to get out in the community, particularly with our business community, and partner with a lot of businesses that help the events be profitable for a few of them. Particularly the Urban Wildland has dozens of sponsors. It's a way that businesses can get involved in the community as well. Like Home Depot is heavily involved with the Ice Fishing Bowl. The Great Pumpkin Giveaway and Red, White, and Blue Days. This year, Steve Schneeberger really stepped up to help us with the medallion hunt, and he pays for all the pumpkins for the giveaway. So people have been really generous and excited to kind of partner with us to make a lot of these events happen. But it's really neat looking at all the different opportunities we provide. We try to keep them very low cost, and most of them are free for community members. And also inclusive. We've tried to, we just started this year, we have a news page for each event, and it has different information regarding ADA. So people will know ahead of time that, how many parking spaces there'll be, and how the event is really set up. So general fund summary, you can see our expenditures are up just a tiny bit, and our proposed expenditures are up just a little over 3% for 2020, and we'll kind of get into the details of that. And our revenue is down just a little bit, and we'll touch on the reasons why. Our department's broken into, the first one's Recreation Administration, and that budget's down this year, and it will be down next year, primarily because of my salary and the difference between Jim's and my salary. So that's a cost savings overall to the department. And overall programs, the Adapted to Revise is almost the exact. We're proposing expenditures will go up just a little bit. And then with revenue, it will go down. And a lot of that has to do with our adult softball leagues declining. So we're really just starting to dig into some conversations about overall park planning and having opportunities to kind of provide a new vision to a few of the parks where we might be able to convert softball fields into soccer fields, because that's really where the demand is, and we're not able to meet the demand right now. And with softball declining and soccer increasing, it makes sense where we can to do some of that conversion. And with the increase, a lot of that has to do with step increases of quite a few of the rec supervisors. We also are adding an intern for the summer months next summer. That will help us go a little farther with programming, and also just provide experience for people coming into the field of park and recreation. Another big area of the budget is Wood Lake Nature Center. And the increase that you see in 2019 and 2020, it is over 3%, but a lot of it has to do with the addition of a full-time position, and that's the sustainability specialist. So they'll be on board September 9th, which is exciting, and they'll hit the ground running with the RFP process for haulers, but that expenditure really is aligned with that change.
Director Markle, did you decide and announce that already?
Yeah, we are announcing it, Madam Mayor. We have selected Rachel Lindholm, who is our Green Corps member. So she'll be, she just had a wonderful interview process. And so we offered her the position and she accepted.
Great.
Good.
Yeah.
Councilmember Whalen.
I know part of that position was going to be funded by some of the county funds. Are those included in this increased revenue?
Some of them are factored in, and we do think, we were talking earlier, that the expenditures would be hopefully less than 5%, but you can't base, it's not like a hard science with SCORE funding. It will depend the participation rate, and so we'll get that twice a year, and it won't really be seen as revenue, but it will be a credit to our expenses. But that could be less than the 5% based on how much we get next year in SCORE funding. What we were given as a number from Hennepin County was just an estimate, so hopefully it will be more. We do see a small increase in revenue at Woodlake. We are really strategically trying to do more outreach outside of Richfield and bring in additional school groups. On September 1st, we're going to launch a new campaign with the Roundup program, and it will be a bus scholarship. Busing for field trips is often the biggest barrier, so to help match schools a little bit with that funding, we'll use the Roundup money and have that scholarship program. And we're hopeful to really kind of strategize going out a little bit more on a regional basis and looking at future funding for a new building. And the other area of our budget comes from our special revenue funds, and that includes the ice arena, the outdoor pool, mini golf, and the shelter at Veterans Park. And they kind of operate on their own. The revenue goes back into the same fund. And overall, business has been really strong at both the pool and the ice arena. The pool's had one of its best summers ever. And we'll see we'll get into kind of the detail, but we'll see some changes in the number, particularly with mini golf this year, and that's because we took out the old course and reinvested in a new course. So the numbers will seem a little off with that. And then that huge proposed increase, our sources from the arena would be the refrigeration project, if that project is funded. Yeah.
Councilmember Chapman.
I just have a quick question regarding the mini golf. And I know we lease a private contractor to, so they run it. Do we share revenue with them? Are we partnered in that way? I just wasn't sure.
Yes, so Madam Mayor and Councilmember Troutman, the Wheel Fund is the company that we lease it to. So we just signed a 15-year lease, and it's up. The lease was $12,000 for a year, and now with the new lease, it's $16,000. So it went up by 4. And the Wheel Fund agreed to pay $240,000 over 2 years to reinvest. So they're paying for a lot of the course improvements. And then if they have a great year, anything over $200,000 profit at the mini golf course, we get 10%. So it's a good model because we don't have to have employees, and they do a lot of the day-to-day maintenance over there. Yep.
Councilmember Garcia.
Oh, when did you remodel the mini golf course?
It literally just got done like 2 weeks ago. With the water feature. So it went in this summer, and it has been really, really busy in the last couple weekends.
Good.
Yep.
Does the public, have you let the public know about it so that they can?
Yeah, we have been working with Neil to promote it, but yeah, it's really kind of just reopened. But
Okay.
yeah, I went by today though. Everything looks great. We do have a little bit of landscaping left to do, but overall, it's really a nice improvement.
Great.
Yep. So specifically looking at the ice arena, you can see revenues are up. Proposed sources next year, a lot of money would have to be brought into that budget for the potential refrigeration project. And overall, though, ice arena profits, have increased. You can see without the refrigeration project, we're anticipating almost a $30,000 increase. And that just comes from a lot of private lesson times, the tournaments. Chris has done a really good job reaching out to figure skating and curling and all the different groups that participate there. And the outdoor pool, you can see our revenue is up. A lot of that has to do with the marketing that was done really in the spring with Groupon and like Living Social. We sold passes, which helps the budget tremendously. So we had strong passes sales, and just the warm weather lends to a good budget with the pool. We had almost record number of people out at the pool this summer. And we're hoping to kind of reinvest to provide some more patio furniture. That's one thing that people were asking for throughout the summer, and just more spots with shade, because there's not a lot of area for families to get out of the sun if they need to, particularly little kids. So that's something we'd like to add for next year. And you can just see some of the performance measures for the pool. The daily admission revenue is up from last year. Overall pass attendance is up. Our passes sold, and we almost had 2,000 passes sold just through Living Social. And then just the regular season passes we sell at the pool, 570, which is a really nice amenity for families throughout the summer. And then last is our special facilities, and that includes the mini golf and the picnic facilities at the shelter. And it does look a little skewed because it's typically 40 to 50,000, and it's 141, really based upon all the improvements that we've put in. So when you go out there, there's a brand new course. We just got the water featured completed about 2 weeks ago. So overall, I think with the new course, we're going to start to see more business. We just remodeled to the kind of art center, and they're using that space for people to, have ice cream and treats and things like that. And they open the patio door, so they've created more of a space for people to congregate when they golf. Any questions?
Questions from council members? No? Okay,
Thank you.
So are we wrapping up now?
Sure, so, I don't know did you want to have council members?
Do some final
Just
final
summarize really
comments.
quickly?
Sure. Yep.
I can do next steps.
Are there any final wrap-up comments from council members after reviewing all the proposed budgets?
Well, I think this has been, Mayor, I think this has been really interesting, and I'm always awed with, the talent that we have around this table. All of you are great leaders in your department, and we really depend on you, and we appreciate all the work that you do. And we realize, I think, when you sit through a session like this, just exactly how how complex, your job is. And I think this will be a great addition for each department to do that. When we do the local government academy, I think people will really be surprised, and I think they will. I think once that is done, I think people will really be proud of their community, because right now, people just assume we have a lot of money and this and that and the other, and you really have shown what it's like. And I think Katie is right in saying that, she's got a staff that she can work with and depend on, and that she, wishes to, continue to build. And you're always building, and you're always keeping up, and you're always, it amazes me. And I could take each department and tell you, for example, Sweet Streets and Lindale Avenue, and good grief, we're ahead of so many communities. We are just way beyond ahead, I think. And I also think that the community knows that we're doing our good job, but it's all because of you guys around the table that run terrific departments and contribute so much more than just doing your job.
Thank you, Councilmember Garcia. Other comments? Councilmember Sepple?
I just wanted to say thank you. That was a very thorough presentation, and it was a lot of really good information. So thank you.
Any, Councilmember Whalen?
Two things. One, yeah, again, thank you to all the staff. I really appreciated coming into this as being my first budget presentation, that yes, there's the numbers, but there's also that each department shared kind of some of what is possible with the money, and kind of that our budget is a bunch of numbers, but also a statement of what we want to do and who we want to be as a city. So I appreciate that there was that balance, and I know that takes more work, but thank you to all of you for putting that together. The second thing I did, and I talked to City Manager Rodriguez and Director Regis about this yesterday. I think all of these wonderful things are really true. I think it's important, though, for our residents to know, as they see kind of taxes keep going up, that there are some challenges, and I think a big part of that we're hearing from nearly every department that has various services, that the service calls or the need keeps going up. And so I wanted to hear a little bit for you to share what we talked about yesterday, of just kind of some of the things that we are not saying yes to or not saying yes to yet, in order to try and contain those costs, but knowing that we have some greater need. Yeah.
City Manager Rodriguez?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council Member. So I touched on this a little bit when we did the broad overview. When we had LGA cuts, we cut staff, because it was layoffs and attrition, and we cut staff by over 17%. We have not gone back up to those levels, and yet we're not sleepy little Richfield anymore. You heard that in Director Stark's presentation. You heard it with Director Kiewicz and Chief Henthorn, in that our calls for service are up. So we are responding to all that. There's more pressure on us to deliver better services. This council is very invested in doing better community engagement. That takes time and money. So there's a reality to all of that. But part of the process that you don't see is when the department directors put all their budgets together, they submit them to Chris, and then he and I sit down with the department directors, and Chris goes through line by line and talks about it and asks to see where we can cut, and I'll let Chris talk about that a little bit too. But there were also staff requests that we couldn't honor. I mean, I know that we need them. I know that, and maybe in future years we can look at them. It would help us. It would help us deliver even better services, but we also really tried to keep the budget levy increase below 5%. And it was challenging. So I don't know, Chris, if you.
Well, yeah, primarily when they do submit the budget, and we do sit down and have meetings around the second, third week of July. I mean, I literally nickel and dime them to death. I mean, that's what I do. I mean, I review all their budgets, I review all their line items, I look at the detail and stuff, and I look at prior year's actuals, I look at how they're trending in the current year and things like that. And if if their budget is greater than what they're trending at or something like that, I'll say, hey, do you really need this amount of money and things like that? So I do. I mean, most of them will, agree with me that I do nickel and dime them and things, and I wonder why I do that and stuff. But it's kind of what I have to do and things like that. So so there is savings and things. And also, one thing I want to point out too is when we're going through the CD and the HRA and the EDA budgets, John Stark looked at his budget, looked at the EDA budget and said, I think we can cut the levy here by about $30,000, which is what we did. And that helped out tremendously with bringing the levy down to the level it's at. So I thank John for doing that. And it really wasn't a cut in any of the services for the EDA or anything like that. And they still have sufficient fund balance afterwards, even though we made that cut and stuff. So, I mean, that's kind of the process that we go through each year.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Councilmember Troutman?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just echoing what my colleagues said, I want to say thank you, and I want to say special thank you to Chris Regis. I don't know if this is a labor of love, that's the right word, but I know it's a lot of labor, and I know you're passionate about the city, and
I don't have much of a life, but it is my life.
So I just want to recognize this is a fruit of all your hard work, but especially you, Chris, our Director Regis, and I also want to, similar to what Councilmember Whalen said, it is helpful, even though I know nobody's here to complain, and I know it's really easy to say, well, we could have done this and we didn't, Director Regis and Council, you heartless so and so, that. But I don't receive that in that way at all. I receive it as I know you guys make hard decisions, and we don't get to see those hard decisions. So for all those things that you shared and all the things that you didn't share, I just want to say thank you very much, and I really appreciate that. Even if I don't know granularly what they are, I know that they're there, and I'm really grateful. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say to
Director
echo
Regis.
that. I mean, you give me a lot of credit, but really all the credit goes to everybody in this room, because if they didn't turn in good work to me, then it would make my job that much harder. And they all do a super job in what they turn into me and things like that. So, I mean, it makes my job a lot easier.
Thank you. I, again, will also just echo what our council members have said, but it almost feels like it's just difficult to express the amount of appreciation and gratitude that I have, and I know our council has, for all of the leadership and work that our department heads are doing. And I think there was several things. I just feel like it felt like it all came together for me after this, bumpy, rough months of transition and that we continue to go through. But a couple things that I wanted to highlight. I know that there was a lot of work done in preparing this budget and doing it differently. And I personally appreciate, and I know the council does too, because a lot of us are newer, just the level of detail and explanation and giving us the comprehensive picture, but also sharing the changes, the challenges, the opportunities as well. It really, and in a way that was extremely digestible and straightforward and simple. So I really appreciated the effort to really work on the presentation piece of it itself. And then another thing that I noticed in the presentation was I felt like every single department, when they were presenting their work, really focused on that hometown feel, Richfield residents first, and building this city and community that we're so proud of, and we always have been proud of, and really using that to look at kind of how we look to the future. So again, and you see more engagement, you see, as Chief was saying, and as we heard, more people are getting engaged, and I just think that's a testament to our staff really focusing on that urban hometown and continuing to do that. So I really appreciated that. I also heard a lot of flexibility and adaptability to trends from our department heads, things like climate change, but also changing demographics, changing, our changing market, changing opportunities in Richfield. And those are things you just can't really account for or foresee. And I heard, every single department looking at, okay, what are the different things that we might want to think about, where might we want to, look at our ordinances, look at the approaches that we're taking in account for doing things differently. So I appreciated that. And then I just kept going back to the discussion we had about goal setting when we talked about building in, continuing to provide great, city services and infrastructure. Or what was it? What was the pillar? Maintaining core services, correct. So I felt like that everyone presented a really great balance of really focusing on maintaining core services, doing it in a way that puts Richfield first and relationships first in that urban hometown, but then also looking at innovation. And it wasn't necessarily, and I don't know, even though we may sound like this is what we want, but I think about how do you focus on that, but also it's just the way we do things and doing it a little bit differently and adapting, but it doesn't have to be these huge drastic, overhauls and changes, but it's just updates to the way we do things. And I saw that balance throughout all of the presentations, so that balance of doing that equity first, doing the community first,